Let's start with the summary of the budget for 2023. It was a history high budget, with 388.1 billion being put onto the table this time around by our new Prime Minister. Now, from the entire budget, you will realize that it's actually been split into four categories, three categories, with operating expenditure. Okay, hold on a second. With operating expenditure comes to 289 billion, and development expenditure of 99 billion, contingency savings funds of 2 billion. So this is the total allocations that we are looking at. Let's go straight into what is actually within the operating expenditure. A lot of people will think that the entire 289 billion was actually being used to pay the government servant. No, not entirely, ladies and gentlemen. If you looked into the entire composition, this information are actually from the MOF.gov.my website. You can also download this particular public information as well. You will realize that the operating expenditure is actually the little curve that is actually on your right hand side, and you'll realize that for emoluments, right, it is actually an amount that is 23% only. The rest was actually for all other different usage. The one in brown was actually the development expenditure that the government is going to put towards too. And where does the money come from? You can look into on the left-hand side on the compositions of the percentage. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if I put it into a bar chart, we will realize that as compared the past 2 years, it is indeed the highest budget. That includes the development expenditure that was actually being allocated aside, right? In the past, we are seeing about maximum of 22.8%. And this year, we see a 25.38% that was being allocated aside. Now, the focus of 2023 budgets was 3 areas. Number 1, we talked about, if I may pick up my spotlight here. All right. We talked about the government wanted to be able to grow the economy, right? The sustainable economic growth. This is the first focus that we talked about. The second one was actually how would our government restore confidence back into our economy in terms of our governance, our transparency, etc., etc. And as you can see, there is this area that we call the public sector reform, which is actually in the focus area as well, right? And the third one is the social justice, the inequality, how do we actually combat the inequality through social justice, whereby we see that the government put forward a budget whereby they are actually reducing the taxes for some sector of income group, but they actually increases the taxes for another group. So out of these 3 areas of focus, if we are going to in a bird's eye view approach, then you will realize that allow me to just leave this bar a little bit. You'll realize that it's actually broken it down into this 4 categories. What is actually important to pay attention if the fulfilling the economy needs of the people, whereby the tax reduction was actually being introduced for certain classes. If we are to go into the public sector reform, which is on the second one, to restore the government confidence or the corporate confidence, you would realize that the empowering the public and private sector collaboration became an area that the government was actually looking into as well, right? And so is other areas that was actually put under, including the strength and the role of the agency. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for today's discussions, because the public will be the listener, I will be focusing a lot on my discussions over this particular 3rd pillars of discussions, which including the Payung Rahmah, as well as other focus, especially money for the startups, as well as the M40. Now, the allocations of budget 2023, if we are to look into sector by sector, let's start from the company, because most of us here are business owners. All right. Now, if we are to look into the first category, we will realize that through the budget, you will see there are numbers, 43, 44, 45, 46. These are information from the budgets, yeah, whereby we summarize them out for everybody to actually see the content. You realize that micro SMEs, micro and small medium enterprises was actually given a financial facilities of 40 billion, right? On top of that, loan facility under Bank Negara as well as BSN and Tekun for micro and enterprises, women as well as youth, 1.7 billion loan facility was also being set aside. Not forgetting 10 billion was actually provided through Bank Negara directly, and 20 billion was actually being put aside for loans whereby the Syarikat Jaminan Pembiayaan Perniagaan will actually be helping to look into the corporate guarantee part in order for your loan to be approved. Now, if I may talk about this particular sector, in fact, since the pandemic, right, ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of facilities and grant was actually being put forward by the government. The biggest challenge I think for businesses right now is with all these facilities and financing as well as bank facilities that was actually set aside to all of us, how many of us are still able to borrow? So I think that is the first thing that we all puzzle at the moment. How many of us are still able to borrow? And a lot of the time, SMEs or micro SMEs, right? One of our biggest challenges is we are busy in running our day-to-day business. So while we are busy in doing that, our paperwork may actually be something that is our challenge, right? Ladies and gentlemen, most of the SMEs, the true fact of most of the SMEs is some of us do our accounts once a year. And to be very honest, as a company secretary, we have so many clients at the moment was actually, applying extension of time with the SSM because the accounts are taking longer time than expected to come out. So for facilities, for financial facilities of any sorts, actually that financial information is very important because an application needs to be put forward in order for you to actually tap this particular facility. There are effort required to put in order for you to actually have the grant, the facilities. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are an SMEs who needed funding to actually grow your business, you must have your financial position updated, all right? And let your accountants check it out and to look into your loanability, yeah, your capability in order to apply for some of this facility that was actually put aside, right? But then having said that, it is a happy thing to know that the government does actually put quite a fair bit aside for the micro SMEs. Now let's talk about, let's move on to SMEs that is slightly bigger, right? It's still SMEs, right? Some of the paragraph from our reads, we actually see that, like paragraph 54, 105, 112, as well as 59, that also talks about the support that the government is intent to actually put forward, including 2 billion of support to be put forward for green technology startup. So ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are actually into green technology related type of business, and if you're a startup, there are, we will talk in more detail later on this particular one, on some of the government's agency, including Petronas, was actually having funds set aside to do investments. Okay, so SME in implementing low carbon practices, there are support that is actually being put forward as well, right? Now, the detail of the support, let's wait for the detail to come out. Now, 45 million was being set aside by Perkeso to provide incentive to employers who are actually doing a certain type of hires, hires of graduates, hires of TV, for those that is actually under TVET. Now, 112, paragraph 112 talks about the government set aside 80 million to improve the palm oil industry, to actually look into their sustainability, as well as how to intensify the fight against anti-palm oil campaign, right? So palm oil is a big industry for Malaysia, right? So 80 million was actually set aside to look into and support this industry forward. Okay, and then a new industry master plan is going to be crafted out to look into incentive to restructure, as well as looking into certain tier of taxes, and whereby we will see that we are moving into an era whereby support are given to a lower income, and tax are to be paid by certain cluster. Okay. Now, if we're talking about Sdn Bhd, slightly bigger, so not a sole proprietorship or partnership or Sdn Bhd, but we talk about pure Sdn Bhd base. We see that there are new tax that it's going to be looked into, right? The government is actually looking into a new taxes whereby they wanted to look into low rate capital gain tax, right? In line with the international best practice. Now, what is this about, ladies and gentlemen? The low rate capital gain tax, they are looking into taxing on shares that is actually not listed. They are not listed in the exchange. So they are looking into when there are actually changes in hands between those unlisted shares, they're looking into a capital gain tax on it. Now, in Malaysia, we already have a real property gain tax, right? So meaning if you are a Sdn Bhd, and this Sdn Bhd is a real property company, meaning a company that is actually owned 75, not less than 75% of assets value inside them against total asset. These are real property company. You already have property gain tax on that. Now, a capital gain tax is new, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there is no detail at this present moment. We are yet to see what is the outcome. Now, this not only will impact the Sdn Bhd, I would say it will also impact the unlisted public company. All right, now let's wait and see on what does it mean by low rate capital gain tax that the government is actually looking for, and what is the mechanism in monitoring them. Okay, on top of that, we see that the government are going to look into measures into Consumer Credit Act, whereby they're going to introduce and set up Consumer Credit Act, as well as a monitoring board. The purpose and rationale behind this is to regulate companies that actually provide consumer credit terms, the buy now, pay later schemes, to protect the consumer rights, as well as to ensure fair service and protection to both the businesses as well as the consumer as well. Now, this again is also a new one. We are yet to see how will it actually comes into the picture. As a business owner, when I see this particular one, I'm welcoming it. At the same time, I'm also concerned about how this is going to be crafted, right? Why would I say so? Because if you pay attention, there are more and more, how do you call, should I say high value products, right? High value products are actually paid via installment. Yeah, paid by installment. So right now, as a company, you can actually own your own, how do you call, promotional package and approach, right? You can work alongside with the credit card companies to actually do your installment package, right? So it will be interesting to see what will this monitoring processes work. I hope that it still remain flexible for businesses, for them to actually roll out and increase and improve their sales, right? Because certain product and services, it does actually require more than one installment to make payments in order to expand the market that they can penetrate in. Now, talking about public listed company, this again is not new. In the past, we see that the government are actually giving tax reductions for up to 1.5 million on the listing exercise fee that was actually spent for a company who wishes to list on ACE as well as LEAP board until 2025. Now, this particular 1.5 million listing expenditure is also expanded to companies who wanted to go to Bursa main board and listed under the technological based company status. All right. So I think this is a very good news for those of you who are actually planning your listing.